That breaking news, a judge has just ruled on the AT&T and Time Warner merger. Of course, we need to point out that CNN is a unit of Time Warner. CNN Justice correspondent Jessica Schneider is live for us at the courthouse. Jessica, what can you tell us?
Well, Jake, quite simply, the judge in this case, the federal district court judge, has essentially approved this merger between AT&T and Time Warner, AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner. I just got out of the courtroom. Judge Richard Leon, for 30 minutes, read his opinion, and at the end of it, he said that basically the government's three theories of harm, all three theories, they did not meet their burden of proof to show that there would be a substantial lessening of competition if, in fact, AT&T acquired Time Warner. So again, this was a 6-week trial. The judge ruling today that this merger can, in fact, go forward. And beyond that, I mean, this was really a complete and total win for AT&T. And what could happen at this point forward is that the government, after losing in this case, they could ask for a stay of this opinion as they go for appeals. And what's important about that is that could effectively render this deal dead. This deal would have to go through by June 21st. That's the merger deadline that has been set by both AT&T and Time Warner, that at which point either party, either company could walk away. So at the end of his ruling here, after the judge said that the government has failed to prove that the judge should deny this merger, the judge went even further than that. And the judge said to the government in very stern words, think before you go to the appeals process with this. Think before you move for a stay here. He said that AT&T had already suffered harm in this, given that the government has been working to block this merger since the lawsuit in November and since the trial started in March. I just want to, a bit of the language that the judge gave here. Again, it was quite stern toward the government. He said, I hope the senior leadership of government will see how unlikely it would be to get a stay and how manifestly unfair it would be when deciding whether to seek this stay. So the judge warning the government, after the government has lost this case, which the government argued for 6 weeks here at this federal courthouse, saying to them, think twice here before you move forward with any motion to stay, whether you move forward with any plans to appeal. Because again, Jake, this merger deadline is just days away on June 21st. If the deal doesn't go forward by then, either party could walk away from this. So that is why the judge had to get this ruling out today to allow that appeals, a time for appeal. So again, Jake, to reiterate, the judge here in this case has effectively approved this merger to go forward pending any appeal or motion to stay by the government. But again, the judge warning the government, think twice before you do this, because the judge says, I don't think you have a great case on appeal. Jake? All
right, Jessica Schneider at the courthouse for us. I want to bring in CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey, on the face of it, it looks like a setback, if not a big defeat for the Trump Justice Department. What's your take?
I would say it's a setback and a big defeat for the Trump Justice Department. I mean, this was a scathing and total rejection of the government's theory that this merger would violate antitrust law. We have not yet had access to the full 170-page opinion of Judge Leon, but he went through each of the government's theories of why this merger would lessen competition and be bad for consumers, and in each case he rejected the government's contention that this would be a bad merger for consumers. And then, as Jessica told you, a really unusual part of his opinion was him saying to the government, look, don't even bother appealing, because if you appeal, if you get a stay, you will kill the deal, even if you lose the appeals court ultimately sides with AT&T and Time Warner, that the procedural will take over for the substance. So he was saying, look, admit you lost and let this deal go forward. You can sue later, he said to the government, to break up the company, but don't try to stop this merger at this late date. That was a very unusual thing that the judge did, and is basically a sign of how much he rejected the Trump Justice Department's arguments in this case.
And Jeffrey, let me ask you, President Trump, when he was just candidate Trump, during the 2016 presidential campaign. He expressed opposition to this deal. Now, on its face, his opposition, his political opposition, seemed rooted in the fact that he obviously does not like CNN, and Time Warner is our parent company. The Justice Department attorney arguing against this merger on antitrust grounds, how much, if any of it, had to do with President Trump's political argument and stated animus towards CNN?
You know, Jake, that is, in many respects, the most interesting part of the case, and it never appeared in the courtroom. Judge Leon, at the very beginning of the case, said to both parties, I am not going to examine the political motivations of the Justice Department. I am not going to even let Time Warner look at whether there were communications between candidate Trump, President Trump, and his Justice Department about this case. I am not going to allow that to be in the evidence presented at all. So that was not part of the case. The judge decided this case solely on the grounds of antitrust law, not on the motivations of the Justice Department. Now, in light of this extremely comprehensive rejection of the government's theory, certainly many people will ask, why did they bring this case at all? Because of candidate Trump's outspoken opposition to it. But in terms of the evidence in the courtroom, Donald Trump, President Trump's statements about the merger never played a part.
Fascinating. Stay there, Jeffrey. I want to bring in CNN senior media correspondent Brian Stelter. And Brian, what stands out to you about this decision by Judge Leon?
Well, this is a ruling that'll be heard throughout the business world. It's a shot that's going to cause a lot of other reactions. We're going to see Comcast in the coming days go ahead and challenge Disney for Rupert Murdoch's 21st Century Fox assets. We're going to see other mergers and acquisitions now as a result, all because there was essentially a holding pattern, all waiting for this ruling. There were many companies watching on the sidelines, wondering what the judge would do. And now that we have an answer, and the answer is so clear, this is not a ruling with a lot of conditions, as many expected. There are not a lot of strings attached. It sounds like there are no strings attached. It is a very clear and comprehensive ruling. So it's a giant thumbs up for the American business world. And that's why, beyond just the media industry, it's an important moment for American business that they're given a thumbs up to go and pursue some more of these deals. In terms of our channel and our parent company, we're going to see AT&T move quickly to try to close this deal now. It's been more than 18 months since the deal was struck, since this attempt to do this acquisition was announced. It's been a very long road. There's an opportunity cost associated with this trial and with the long delay. And so now AT&T, unless there is a stay, unless there is an injunction, unless the government goes ahead and tries to get that, then we'll see these two companies come together next week. So just 6 days from now, CNN will be owned by AT&T.
And let's go back to CNN's Jessica Schneider, who's live at the courthouse. And Jessica, you have a statement from the lawyer from the Justice Department, from the Trump Justice Department, about the case. What does he have to say?
Right, Jake, a swift reaction from the Department of Justice. Macon Delrahim, he's the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Antitrust Division. He was in the courtroom today. He was in the courtroom throughout this 6-week trial, just now issuing a statement here. I'll read it for you. He says, "We are disappointed with the court's decision today. We continue to believe that the pay TV market will be less competitive and less innovative as a result of the proposed merger between AT&T and Time Warner. We will closely review the court's opinion and consider next steps in light of our commitment to preserving competition for the benefit of American consumers." So the Department of Justice there, Macon Delrahim, not saying whether or not the government might seek a stay, might go forward with an appeal. Of course, that's something the judge warned sternly against. And it's interesting that the Department of Justice in this statement still holding to their argument that this acquisition, this merger, would be anti-competitive, especially because the judge just spent 20 minutes in court knocking down each and every argument, line by line, bit by bit. The judge, in fact, at one point, in terms of one of their arguments, put it this way. He said neither category of evidence was effective. It was too speculative in nature. It was contradicted by the government's own evidence. And at the end, he said this evidence had little to no value. But in this statement from the Department of Justice, Jake, the Macon Delrahim, the antitrust chief, seeming to stick by the government's argument and not giving any indication whether they will take heed in the judge's warning not to move forward with any appeal. Jake?
All right, Jessica, thank you so much. Let me bring back Jeffrey Toobin. And Jeffrey, obviously, just to remind our viewers, CNN has a vested interest in this major case because Time Warner is our parent company. Putting that aside for a second and putting aside whether or not this is the right decision by Judge Leon or not, is it consistent with the Trump Justice Department and its attitude towards business? In other words, does trying to stop this merger make sense because of the other principles and ideals that the Trump administration argues for, either through the antitrust division of the Justice Department or elsewhere?
You know, Jake, that is an incredibly important question, and that is why there has been so much suspicion about the motives behind the Justice Department's decision to try to stop this merger. Republicans in general, conservatives in general, going back to the days of Robert Bork, who was sort of the great genius of conservative view of antitrust law, have taken a hands-off view towards mergers. They have basically had a laissez-faire approach. The government should stay out of the business of regulating, of stopping mergers. What made people so suspicious of the government's motives in this case was that here you have a Republican Justice Department trying to challenge a merger. Even more unusual was the fact that this is known as what's called a vertical merger, where AT&T and Time Warner are not competitors. Time Warner is a supplier of content to AT&T. Vertical mergers like that are almost never threatened, are never challenged by any Justice Department, Democrat or Republican. The horizontal mergers, when competitors merge, that tends to be when the government gets involved. So the fact that this was a Republican administration challenging a vertical merger suggested perhaps that some other motives were in play other than simply a neutral application of antitrust law.
I want to bring in Timothy Wu right now. He's a professor at Columbia Law School. Timothy, what's your take on the ruling?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read it like everyone else, but my suspicion is that it may go so far that the Justice Department will want to appeal this. You know, a lot of people in antitrust law have been wanting to bring back scrutiny of vertical mergers. The idea that the government loses this case totally seems strong. They did present a lot of evidence, so I wouldn't be surprised if Justice does seek the appeal, as even despite the district court judge telling them not to.
And what would be the effect of that? Would that have the effect of freezing the merger, ending the merger, just the act of appealing?
It totally depends on what the appellate court does. They may not think it's enough an emergency to stay the merger. They may stay the merger. Even if the merger stayed, it doesn't necessarily mean the merger has to be abandoned. But I think it's possible that because the government thinks these principles are important enough that they'll really want to appeal this.
Do you think that the judge made the wrong decision today?
Well, I haven't read the decision, and I didn't see as much of the evidence as he does. It sounds like he's gone pretty far. It sounds like he's stuck to sort of the 1980s, more kind of Bork line on Chicago line on antitrust. You know, we never do anything. And I think the law has evolved since then, and economic research has evolved. So this decision may be vulnerable to appeal for those reasons.
We only have about 30 seconds left, but as quickly as you can, and I recognize you could probably speak for 6 hours on it, why would such a merger be a bad idea?
Yeah, it's just basically the idea that vertical mergers also cost consumers money, also interfere with competition. And you know, this ruling, again, I haven't read it, but it sounds like the old 1980s Reagan style, nothing vertical is ever suspect. This was a very big vertical merger, and if he's gone too far, the opinion may be very susceptible to an appeal.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time.